Oy vey, Israel now has control over TikTok. Now, it's not the government of Israel in a formal direct sense, but it is many U.S. companies making up about 80% of the ownership of TikTok, the social media platform, and many of those companies, especially the major shareholders, being run by guys who are explicitly Zionist, people who are very pro-Israel, and some of them being Jewish in terms of their ethnicity. And the big concern previously that many people stated was in regards to TikTok having a major power grab from China. Same kind of concept. It's not that the Chinese government formally and directly owned the platform of TikTok, but it was a major Chinese company that comprised about 80% or the vast majority of ownership of TikTok. And so the concern was, well, there's going to be, Chinese interest, right? There's going to be the government of China, even though they don't own the platform directly, by a Chinese company based in China owning TikTok, there's going to be this overlap. There's going to be a conflict of interest. The Chinese government is going to put pressure on this Chinese business to monitor and suppress certain forms of speech or boost the algo in a certain direction that benefits China and their propaganda, the things that suit them, the things that favor them at the cost of other countries like America. Well, it's the same principle now applied in a different direction. It's American companies now that are the shareholders owning 80% of TikTok. But with those companies, Oracle being one of them, one of the major companies, they are Zionist and have been explicitly clear about this. And this isn't just speculation, right? So this is not just your typical, low IQ anti-Semitism. We're going to bring some of the receipts and show you how TikTok, just in the last few days, is already suppressing some forms of speech that previously were allowed. And what forms of speech is it suppressing? Well, you guessed it, the forms of speech that Israel doesn't like. Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, has already come out and is beginning to try to manipulate and influence and even pay off certain social media influencers with a predominant presence on TikTok that are on the right to be pro-Israel and to push pro-Israel rhetoric. Israel owns TikTok. That is it's a general statement, but it is generally true. Israel, for all intents and purposes, now owns TikTok. And here's the deal. They will not be content with merely owning TikTok. They're going to come for everything. They're going to come for X. They're going to come for your favorite platform. And when that happens, right now, criticism towards Israel, especially for pretty much everybody in our country, in America, under the age of 45, on the left or the right, criticism towards Israel among young people, even on the right, is at an all-time high. Israel knows this. Netanyahu knows this. Israeli intelligence and government, they know this, and they are making a major push to stop it. They know that they're in trouble. They know that the pro-Israel, Israel first gravy train in these United States is coming to a screeching halt. It's coming to a screeching halt. They have maybe 10, maybe 15 years left. The boomers are not going to be here forever. The relations that the United States has had with Israel and a favorable view of Israel is coming to an end. They know that they need to capitalize on the younger generation. They know that the left is pretty much a lost cause, but maybe they could capitalize on young people on the right. So they're paying influencers. They're buying social media platforms. This is the play. And they're not going to be content with TikTok alone. They're going to push further. They're going to try to take it all. That's the episode. We'll bring receipts. We'll show you what's happening and some of our predictions for what's to come. Let's tune in.
You have the Netanyahu.
A big theme for this year has been fifth generation warfare. We think of first and second generation. That's sticks and stones, right? You go out, whoever's stronger, you just pulverize the opponent. But we've reached the point where actually the real battle, it isn't really even fought kinetically. It's not even being fought entirely with drones and tanks and robots, but it's a battle for information.
Right.
This is why Palantir and J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel, it's a big deal. If you control information that people can see, my goodness, you control entire narratives. If people are just simply not allowed to say certain things, then you've effectively made it so that certain conversations, ideas, thoughts, history, can't even be discussed. Think of the Chinese Communist Party. They've censored the entire history of the Tiananmen Square when they murdered their own citizens. They've simply said, we don't want you to see that. And so we've effectively, through our firewall, has meant that 1.3 billion people have no access to this history. Access to information is important. And we're living in an information age. And TikTok, like it or love it, and I hate it, I don't use it. I think a lot of us would agree it's brain rot.
Right.
There's a huge generation, 10 years old to probably about 30. They use this thing every day.
Yep.
So you can love it or hate it. But the fact is, and
Young
maybe it's not
people
your
are on
kids, maybe it's not even your church. There's a lot of people that are on it. And so your ability, if you could direct TikTok, hey, this can be shown, we'll allow, for example, this perverse thing. We'll allow this material, but not this. My goodness, you can shape an entire generation. Billions and billions of young people. Kings could only dream of the power to influence what 500 million young men are watching. Think about that. Back in the day, nobody had that level of control. But with globalism, for one, so a kind of universally accessible framework and internet, and with corporations that are huge and massive in scale, you can control an entire generation, showing them this, not that. And so that's why this matters. Back in April 2024, relating to these privacy concerns, relating to the control a foreign government could have, Congress, the U.S. Congress, passed a bill that said TikTok, unless they are sold to a domestically owned, a United States ownership, they're going to have to shut down. You can't take this data. You can't be stationed in a foreign country, be collecting all this information. I mean, your phone, for certain iPhones, they can track eye movement. So it's not just, oh, I watched this for 1.2 seconds. Where did their eyes go? What colors were they looking at? And so Congress came out at maybe one of the best things they've done in a year. They haven't done a lot. And they said, look, this has to be sold and be onshore. This has to be in the United States. You can't keep collecting this data. And this is a big deal. If you remember towards the end of last year, is TikTok going to shut down? You had a million Zoomers cried out in agony when there looked like, I think it was about 30 minutes, it went offline. And that was because our Congress, who we elected and the president signed it, said, hey, TikTok has to go. This is nefarious. They're gathering data that they shouldn't have. Well, Trump came out and they formed a deal to basically extend the deadline. So even when Congress does something good, if it's too good, they say, well, we didn't actually mean it. We're not actually going to shut it down. Right. So to facilitate TikTok staying open, the owning company, it's called ByteDance, and it's headquartered in China. Again, not the Chinese government, as you were saying.
But a Chinese company that absolutely will be susceptible to Chinese governmental pressure.
Yep, exactly. So they've said, and they've worked through, and Trump's actually brokered this deal to sell it to a number of different firms in the United States. And so when you have something that's worth in the billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, that's not just going to be one investor coming in and buying it. It's not even going to be a government buying it, but it's going to be a package deal where some will manage handling, some will manage, for example, moderation, some will handle finances. This is a huge sale of literally one of the most popular social media platforms. And where it comes in that we're saying Israel specifically has an interest in it. Again, we're not talking about the Israeli government. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he's not taking an ownership stake in TikTok. But this has been something that we've got at a lot this year. When you have people in a nation that you could call them hyphenated Americans, right? So they have one allegiance,
we've
American.
Got paperwork Americans.
We've got paperwork Americans.
We've got Tylenol Americans. We've got all kinds of Americans.
It's like Somali American, right? Ilhan Omar. Well, you literally see her saying, well, I have duties to America. Sure, I'm literally representative. But also, I kind of really like Somalia.
The reality is there should be no hyphenated American. You're American or you're not. So I would say that Somalia, so it's not to say all the Somalians, let's just start calling them Americans instead of Somalian Americans. I think they should be called Somalians. I also think they should live in Somalia.
That was Teddy Roosevelt's point back at the early 1900s. He's like, there is no such thing as a hyphenated American. Do not come here. Oh, I'm a French American. I'm Japanese American. I'm this American. He's like, no, you leave all that behind. It's Ruth back in the Old Testament.
Exactly. We use this example all the time. Yeah. So she doesn't say, hey, I'm going to set up, little Chinatown, little Moab town. In the middle of Jerusalem. No, like when she makes the switch, when she decides to follow her mother-in-law, Naomi, and go back to Israel, because now the famine has lifted, there's grain in Israel, and, her husband, Naomi's son, is now dead, and her sister-in-law, her husband, Naomi's other son, is dead, and Naomi's husband is dead. She makes the decision, I'm not going to stay in Moab. I'm going to go with my mother-in-law, Naomi, back to Israel, and your people shall be my people, your God shall be my God. She's not putting one foot, straddling the line, one foot in both camps. She doesn't go back to Israel to be a Moab Israelite.
Right.
she goes to be an Israelite. So there's a forsaking of her foreign gods from Moab. There's a forsaking of her Moabite people, and she's going to be fully bought into Israel.
Yep. And so when it comes to Jewish Americans, these are individuals that by descent, they would be racially, ethnically Jewish. A pattern that's emerged, and I mean, even a California professor, Kevin McDonald's written a huge book on this. He's a professor at University of California, evolutionary biologist. And he says, yeah, there's a certain in-group kind of preference that they have for one another. This is not anti-Semitic. It's not a conspiracy theory. Different people that originate from the same point before they move, they share a type of cohesion that they don't share with other people. German Americans coming from Germany, moved to America. A lot of them moved to the Midwest. There's huge Dutch communities in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Why? Because a lot of Dutch people that left the Netherlands moved to America and then wanted to be around,
They settled in the
start
same
stores
place.
for, go to church with other Dutch Americans, for lack of a
They
better
wanted
word.
to be with people who were going to have the same kind of religion. They wanted to be with people who would speak the same language, the same foods, the same customs, those kinds. So that's natural. Our job is to not let them come in.
Exactly. So the point is,
I don't blame them for doing that.
for lack of a better
I blame
word,
our leaders for opening the door.
yeah, our immigration policy set this up. So you have millions of, for lack of a better term, Jewish Americans. They live here, they're citizens here, whatever that would mean on paper. But they very much so have a strong allegiance to another country. They care for its prime minister. They care for its wars. They donate money. And where it really becomes a problem is when these people are worth billions of dollars. It's one thing if I have an affinity for Germany because I have ancestry there, or someone has an affinity for a certain tribe in Africa. We talked about Vodi Bakum.
Right.
He goes back to Zambia.
Right.
That's one thing.
God bless them.
But when you're, for example, Larry Ellison, Chief Technical Officer of Oracle, which is going to be the anchor of this deal, and you are an avowed Zionist, and you have, it was 2021, he was reported to have even offered now Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a seat on the board at Oracle. You love Israel.
right.
So you're American in one sense. You're a CTO, Chief Technical Officer of an American company, but your whole life, it's like, all right, I got some extra money. Israel, donate. Here, this, that, or the other. All of a sudden it goes, well, you're about to own the biggest social media company that's existed in the last 5 years. You'll see here on the screen, Ellison's close ties to Trump and Netanyahu. Again, this is just an objective reporting of the facts. I'm going to read it for anyone that's listening. Larry Ellison, again, CTO at Oracle. Oracle's going to be the anchor in this TikTok deal. Has had a decade-long history with the Republican Party and a close relationship with Trump, going back to the president's first term. Ellison has frequented Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort for dinner, met him in the Oval Office, as Trump has repeatedly postponed complying with the Supreme Court's January ruling. Supreme Court came in January this year. They said, no, you have to ban TikTok. Congress passed this. As Trump has repeatedly postponed complying with the ruling, if it's not sold, Oracle has emerged as a lead buyer of the popular social media app. In the case of Larry Ellison, it's well beyond technology, sort of CEO of everything, Trump said during a news conference a day after he was inaugurated. He's an amazing man, an amazing business person. Ellison is also close to the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and has donated heavily to the Israeli military through the nonprofit Friends of the Israel Defense Force. In 2017, he gave the organization its biggest ever donation at the time, $16.6 million. Oracle did not respond to questions from The Guardian asking if Ellison had donated more recently. The guy loves him some Israel.
Yep.
He's from there. That is his affinity. Here's some of the other buyers. Silver Lake, private equity, MGX. So this is an Abu Dhabi-based AI investment group. Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z. So this was co-founded with Mark Andreessen, and then I forget his first name, but another Jewish individual, I think maybe Alexander Horowitz. So that's another private equity group that's in there. Some of the other purchasers, Michael Dell. He's the founder of Dell, Jewish CEO. The Rupert and Laken Murdoch. So those have also been backed by Trump as potential buyers. In short, you have a lot of people with an affinity for Israel. So you're talking about media, which Jews have been overrepresented in. And now we're talking about the most popular social media, right? Legacy news is dying. Your CBS, your Fox News, your CNN. At a certain level, they just don't have the reach they did. What does have the reach is TikTok. And now as it's moving to the U.S., it's kind of like, oh, so it's coming to the U.S., so it'll be owned by Americans, right? It'll be owned by Americans, right? No, it's going to be owned by people that very much so have a vested interest.
Jews and Jews adjacent.
Who making sure certain content isn't there. Let's listen to Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel.
Yep, his
Let's
own
listen
words.
to his comments as he realizes they're actually losing the social media war.
Yep.
Christian influencers. Okay. You said, we talked about the woke right. And you said, I call it the woke Reich. That's a brilliant observation. The woke right, because these people, they're not any different from the woke left. I mean, they're insane. They're loonies. But they're actually meeting on some of the things. And what we have to do is we have to secure that part of the base of our support in the United States. That is being challenged systematically. A lot of this is done with money. Money of NGOs, vast. Money of governments, vaster. Okay? We have to fight back. How do we fight back? Our influencers. I think you should also talk to them if you have a chance. To that community, they're very important. And secondly, we're going to have to use the tools of battle. The weapons change over time. You can't fight today with swords. That doesn't work very well. Okay, and you can't fight with cavalry. That doesn't work very well. And you have these new things, like drones, things like that. I won't get into that. But we have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we're engaged. And the most important ones are the social media. And the most important purchase that is going on right now is
Followers.
TikTok. TikTok, number one. And I hope it goes through because it can be consequential. And the other one, what's the other one that's most important? X. Exactly. Very good. And, so we have to talk to Elon. He's not an enemy. He's a friend. We should talk to him. Now, if we can get those two things, we get a lot. And I could go on other things, but that's not the point right now. We have to fight the fight, okay? To give direction to the Jewish people and give direction to our non-Jewish friends or those who could be our Jewish our friends. Are we going to succeed with everyone? No. Will there be a strong counterpart? Yes.
There you have it. So going after TikTok, number 2, X.
Yep.
Elon is a friend. Don't like that. We'll see. Pray for Elon. Pray that he resists the temptation to be a Zionist shill. I can't help. There's 2 things I want to pick out of that video. One, he said, the weapons of warfare change. And that's what we were talking about. 5th generation warfare, the battle for information, propaganda, right? It's messaging. And so he said, the cavalry doesn't work, swords don't work, drones don't work. I'd be remiss if I did not mention at this juncture that drones seem to be working just fine when it comes to Gaza. So Israel is perfectly fine with cavalry, with tanks, with drones, with missiles. But what they're saying is, well, we can't bomb America, at least.
Right.
At least not,
until their ships come into our bay, we can't.
Right. At least not in an obvious way. Maybe we could do it in a subversive way, but so they're saying when it comes to the West, when it comes to European nations and predominantly America, because we're the most powerful out of the West, we have to fight. We have to fight fire with fire. So in this case, the weapons of warfare being information, being social media platforms. So going for TikTok, they've achieved that, and then going after X. If you think that X is invulnerable, then you are being naive. X could absolutely fall like this into the hands of being pro-Israel, shilling for Israel at every single turn. So that's the first thing that I wanted to mention. The second is all the way back to the beginning of that clip that we just showed with Netanyahu, where he talks about the woke right, and he doesn't name this individual, but he says, I've had, people tell me, the woke right or the woke Reich, and he laughs and I think that's perfect. That's a great name. I'll be honest. I first saw that phrase, woke right and woke Reich. I both saw them, coined in the first instance by James Lindsay. And I don't know about you, but, James Lindsay has had some contributions in the past. I think of, 2019, 2020, 2021. But it's been about 3 straight years of posting coal. Everybody has some cringe. I have some, we all post cringe from time to time. But there's a certain cringe quota that's permissible, right? That's allowable. But I'm talking 3 years of 100% cringe, 100% coal, and yet still somehow has support from somewhere. Yeah. Right. Still in the game, still putting out material, still being listened to by someone. And I think we're starting to get our answers, right? Everybody did this big thing about Qatari money. Have you seen any Qatari money?
I've been looking for it.
I've been looking for it. I keep waiting, with bated breath for the check to come in the mail. It's never come. But I think if we want to really be honest, I think we need to point the guns in the other direction, so to speak, and say, who's getting Zionist money? Who is getting, and we've seen this. It was just posted yesterday. Receipts that Netanyahu and Israel's government is paying I think it was like $6,800 to $7,200 per post to post positive things for Israel from certain, influencers on the right.
Which, to be honest, I'd do it because nobody would believe me. I would post it and they would be like, wait a second.
You would not do it. I would not allow it. He wouldn't do it. Ladies and gentlemen, he wouldn't.
I will split it with
joke.
you 50-50.
No, can't do it. Can't do it. So this is what's going on. You need to be aware of it. We need to get into tactics just briefly. So, one, there's, paying to purchase a platform. Two, there's paying individual influencers to post things that are positive towards Israel, to influence young people on the right. Three, a more subtle approach that certain individuals in Israel use on a regular basis. It has become a tradition of sorts these past few years. Is, all right, I'm not going to directly pay you to post something positive about Israel. And no, I don't, have enough money to purchase, TikTok or some major social media platform. But what I will do is me and my 501c3 organization, we will fit the bill for a fully sponsored trip to Israel. And you'll come to Israel, and we're not going to make you kiss the wall. Some guys will just do that for free. But we're not going to make you kiss the wall. We're not going to make you.
If you're running for office, you do. But if you're a Christian minister,
you're a Christian minister.
Make you.
So we're not going to make you, kiss the wall. We're not going to make you wear the tiny hat. Greg Locke, he'll do it for free. But we're not going to make everybody else do that. We just want you to come and think about this. Right? This is the pitch, right? It's somewhat of a compelling pitch. It's subtle. It's not overt, and there's some incentive. We're going to pay all expenses paid trip for a week or 2 weeks to Israel, and you get to see the holy sites. You get to walk the streets that Jesus walked, right? Don't you want to see where? Right, you're a Christian. Don't you want to see where Jesus ministered and where he
was baptized, the Jordan,
right, where he was baptized, and where he preached the Sermon on the Mount and these kinds of things, and so. A lot of guys will do that trip. And I'm not saying, I want to be clear here, I'm not saying that it is inherently sinful to do that trip. But what I've noticed is it seems as though there's a pipeline. So first, you get approached to do this trip, all expenses paid. Second, you do the trip and you come back, and some of these guys come back and will almost immediately start saying positive things about Israel that are categorically false.
Right.
Categorically false. Like Israel being, the front lines against LGBT barbarism. That was a quote.
Or Islam.
Even with Islam, it's like, well, they're fighting Islam in the Middle East. They are absolutely fighting Islam in the Middle East. To
Man, woman, and child. They are fighting them.
That's right. Whether all the way down to starving, Islamic children at every level, they are absolutely fighting. And that's not fifth generation warfare. That's your good old fashioned cavalry and drones. So they are fighting Islam in the Middle East to keep Islam out of Israel. But one of the ways they fight it is they decimate Islamic countries and then open the doors in Western countries for immigration and refugees. They hold open the door. So I admit that the average Jewish person here in America is not necessarily, a violent person who's doing physical blatant harm. And I do think that when it comes to individual people, I do think that in many ways, Muslims in America, there's just way too many Muslims. That is a problem. They're setting up 90-foot tall, statues to demon gods right outside of Houston in our state of Texas. Muslims are a problem. But when you look at how are Muslims getting in, and you look at the NGOs, right, non-government organizations, and you look at the politicians, American politicians, I'm talking about now, the ones who are opening the doors with, to allow this influx, this invasion of Muslims into the United States, many of them have Jewish ties. They're either ethnically Jewish or religiously Jewish, or they're married, their spouse is Jewish, or they're a Zionist and have ties with Netanyahu.
One of the biggest groups is the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. They were started in the late 1800s, first for Jews to resettle, but now it's literally everyone. And it is one of the biggest groups for immigration, facilitating it, paperwork, sponsorship, help. We just got to be honest.
Right.
These have been one of the biggest groups to resettle people here in America.
So when guys, make claims and statements like, Jews in America are not the problem, it's Muslims. Okay, but you have to understand how the two groups work in tandem. Muslims flood in, but Jews, in a general sense, not each and every single one of them, but this is a general statement, and it is generally true. It is Jewish people or those with Jewish ties who hold the door open for the Muslims to come in. And so back to this pipeline real quick. So it's, hey, we'll give you $7,000 to post something positive about Israel. All right. Oh, that's too overt. Okay. You need something a little bit more subtle. Well, never mind. Don't do that. Hey, I would just like to invite you as a Christian influencer, as a Christian, minister, to do a trip to Israel just to see the Holy Land and where Jesus walked. And it's all expenses paid. It's a sponsored trip. Some guys go on that trip. Again, I'm not saying it's inherently sinful to go on that trip. Some of them go on that trip and they go back and they're the same person and they're authentic, right? Other guys go on that trip and they come back and they immediately start saying wild, ridiculous things that are untrue, like saying that that Israel is the front lines against LGBT barbarism when Tel Aviv is one of the gay capitals of the world, right? You can't walk down a single street without being bombarded by the Rainbow Mafia, flags and paraphernalia everywhere. So some guys are going on this trip, and although it's not overtly said, hey, we'll pay for this trip, but you have to post positive things on social media about Israel. Some of the guys do. They come back and they do that. Not all of them, some of them. Next step in the pipeline is if you go on that trip, and you network and make connections, and you come back, and even if you don't say things, start posting things positive about Israel, especially things that are blatantly false, but you at least just don't post negative things. You just kind of leave Israel alone, right? You're posting against Muslims, right? You're posting against the globalists, right? Whoever they are. We know who they, but we're posting against the globalists, the Marxists, maybe even the Bolsheviks, but we never say who the Bolsheviks are either. And we certainly are posting against the Muslims. You do that, and you don't say anything explicitly positive about Israel, but you also don't say anything explicitly negative. Next step in the pipeline, all of a sudden you're invited to NatCon. And in NatCon, that's where we're hearing some of these lines. This is a statement that is it's not just a throwaway. It's not just a one-off. More than one. Many Christian ministers and non-Christian ministers have all made this statement at NatCon recently, just a couple months ago at their latest conference, NatCon 2025. NatCon stands for National Conservative. It's headed up by Yoram Herzoni. One of the statements is that America must be a Christian nation again. We need Christian nationalism. Who would be invited into this project of a Christian nation here in America? And there are three groups that are explicitly listed, and it's said ad nauseum multiple times. It's Protestants, Catholics, Jews. Protestants, Catholics, Jews. Hindus? No. Muslims? No. Atheists? No. Protestants, Catholics, Jews. And my problem is not with the rejection of Hindus and Muslims, or atheists for that matter. My problem is the inclusion of Jews and Reformed ministers who I believe should know better. And this is one of the problems with the Reformed tradition. I love the Reformed tradition. I am Reformed in my theology. But one of the problems is that because John Calvin and Martin Luther and Zwingli and these guys, one of the biggest battles at their time in their place, right? We don't do theology in a vacuum, right? It's all a matter of providence, time and place, and where God has set us. Well, at their time, the behemoth was Rome. It was Roman Catholicism. So a lot of what Luther is railing against, now Luther does write a book called The Jews and Their Lies at the end of his life, but early on, and what he's mostly remembered for is battling not against the Jews, but rather against Roman Catholicism. Same certainly with Calvin and other reformers. Well, at that time, Rome, I believe, was a much bigger problem than it poses today. Back then, they're selling indulgences, they're oppressing people. Today, you have the Pope blessing, blocks of ice. Right?
Not
now,
great.
Is it cringe? You betcha, right? Like a Catholic Pope does something cringe, must be another day that ends in Y, right? It's, people be like, well, you got Paula White. Well, the beautiful thing about Protestantism is that I have no formal ties to Paula White whatsoever. She has no ecclesiastical authority in the Protestant church whatsoever. But if you're Catholic, then you got to sit there and take. There's some wonderful things. There's some terrible things. And one of the terrible things is that pretty much every single day you have to rack up L's. Every single day you have to, my Pope blessed a block of ice. Yep, this happened. Yep, that
My
happened.
Pope said, if you're against abortion but for the death penalty, you're not pro-life.
Right. You have
Take
to
the
sit there
L,
and say, that's
wear
your
it.
Pope, and you are bound to him.
You have to
actually
say,
are
that is the
bound to him.
vicar of Christ on earth.
The vicar
first among
of Christ
equals.
on earth is posting coal, and I'm a based young Catholic who just converted 3 weeks ago, and so obviously I'm an expert in all things Catholicism. Well, that's great, but you also have to sit there and say, yep, and the vicar of Christ is blessing blocks of ice at a climate change conference. So, anyways, the point is, Catholicism, Roman Catholicism, was a major problem in the 1500s, in the 1600s. I do not view Roman Catholics, and this is where Reform guys get mad at me, I do not view Roman Catholics as a cultural and political enemy today. I don't. I believe they are co-belligerents. So I would agree with the statement that's made at NatCon and elsewhere, right? There's 3 main groups that are a part of this Christian nationalism project. It's Protestants, Catholics, and Jews. I would agree with the inclusion of Catholics. I don't think that we're going to win in the United States as we push back against the orcs. If Protestants, if Reformed guys are being autistic and saying that, that Catholics cannot, I understand the theological issues, right? I share those issues. They matter. But I'm talking about in the realm of the political and cultural, okay? In the political and cultural realm, I believe that Roman Catholics and Protestants must unite if we're going to win. I don't think we have enough numbers in isolation, but between us, I think there's significant influence and a significant force for good.
And that's the view of some of the Puritans. Baxter,
yep.
Herman Bavinck wrote that as well, that the Roman Catholic Church, even as a Protestant, he said they have errors, but they are in the people and of themselves, a true church.
Right.
And on Sunday morning when they gather together.
He wasn't necessarily speaking about the Pope in specific, but Catholics, not Catholicism, but Catholics, they gather together and that it's a true church in error.
Yes. And the errors are real and they matter.
And they matter.
But you are consistent with a number of Reformed Protestant thinkers that also thought the same thing.
I am. And I honestly, guys, I don't know how to say it other than this. I've said it a few times, but I'll say it again. I'm not interested in just LARPing. It's like the reenactment of the Civil War, at some, annual festival where everyone dresses up and pretends, the South and the North, hashing it out again, and everybody celebrates, and then they all eat corn on the cob, and some kind of refreshment or whatever. Like I'm not interested in having the annual, Five Solas conference, every single year. We've been doing it for 500 years. We're going to battle against a dragon that is already in many ways had all 4 of its legs bound and tied together, and a bucket of ice, maybe the same ice that the Pope blessed, poured over its snout, where it's no longer able to breathe fire. It's not the threat that it once was, and yet we're going to pretend. It's like we make like a Roman Catholic piñata, and all the Protestants stand in line once a year at some festival, and we hit it together. I'm just not in. I want to fight living, breathing dragons. I want to fight the enemy of the day, not the enemy of yesterday. And so that doesn't mean that Catholicism and the theological distinctions between Protestants and Catholics doesn't matter. As a local pastor, I preach about those things as they come up in the text. We do expositional preaching through books of the Bible. But in the cultural and political realms, I believe that Catholics are a suitable, logical ally to fight in those arenas. Jews are not. That was my whole point. My whole point was to say, I don't disagree with the discluding of Muslims and Hindus and atheists. And I also don't disagree with some of these guys and their inclusion of Catholics. What I disagree with is their inclusion of Jews. Muslims are not a part of a Christian nationalist project. They're not. Catholics, I believe, are, in a cultural and political sense, a part of a Christian nationalist project. Jews, though, are not. Somehow Jews got lumped in. Think about that. Like Catholics, for all the disagreements that we have, they believe in the Trinity. They believe that Jesus is the only begotten Son of the Father, born of the virgin birth, that he's sinless, that
They
he
confess
died.
the Apostles' Creed.
They confess the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed. They believe he died a substitutionary death, that the blood of Christ atones for sin. He was bodily raised on the 3rd day. He ascended in glory and majesty, is seated at the right hand of the Father, and will one day return to judge both the living and the dead. Are there errors? Yes. But is there much agreement? Also, yes. is there any agreement? So Catholics believe all the things I just said. Jews believe that Jesus is a bastard son of a whore and that he's currently burning in hell. And I won't be too graphic about how he's burning, but you can look that up for yourself. They hate Christ. They absolutely hate Christ. And so, no, I don't believe that Jews should be a part of this project. So my point is, sometimes it's overt. You're buying TikTok and then coming for X, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the second segment. Sometimes it's overt, but more individual. I'm paying this right-wing influencer $7,000 for a positive post about Israel to turn the tides among young people on the right wing. And then sometimes it's subtle. It's, don't you want to see the streets where Jesus walked? We have a sponsored, full expense paid trip, and you can come and there's no strings attached. You don't have to say anything positive. You might be a fool and choose to say something positive in your very next podcast the moment you return, but you don't have to do that. And if you just don't say anything negative, you might get an invitation to speak at a breakout session at NatCon. And at NatCon, you'll hear one of the lines that is pushed again and again and again. You know that it's overt. You know that it's intentional because multiple people say the exact same scripted thing. Hey, Christian nationalism, that's what we need in America. This project is an exclusive project. Many people are not welcome, but there's three groups that are: Protestants, Catholics, and the guys who have nothing in agreement with Protestants and Catholics whatsoever, somehow they're also
We're a tiny
included.
group through the early, it was only through a wave of immigration, I think late in the 1800s, that about 3.5 million Jews came. They were not represented. There was not states, Maryland, that were Catholic. There were not Supreme Court justices.
America was Protestant
that we had early on that were Jewish.
But there was a minority of Catholics early on in our heritage.
And a meaningful minority, enough to not just say 5 or 10. A meaningful minority.
A meaningful minority. That's my point is overall Protestant. That's America's history.
Yep.
But a meaningful minority of Catholics present. There was no minority of Jews present until you're already a good 100 years removed, not 100 years into America, right? Because we forget about, the 13 colonies and everything, before the Constitution, before 1776. But I'm saying, no, now you're a century removed from 1776, and a very small group of Jews are just now starting to arrive, and yet somehow Jews are a part of this restoration, American heritage project. How? And the only answer to that is not because it's historically accurate, not because it's theologically accurate, because that's certainly not the case. The answer is influence and money.
Right.
They're getting to be included on the team by many because of power, because they're powerful. And we think that that's wrong, and that needs to be, you don't have to be a jerk, you don't have to be a bigot, but it does need to be said. It needs to be said publicly, and solid Christians who love the Lord Jesus Christ and love America and its heritage need to be able to speak out against this. NatCon, you need to be willing to say that. NatCon, a lot of great stuff. A lot of great stuff. We would agree with probably 95% of the things that are said and appreciate it. But this is one line of rhetoric that's being pushed at NatCon. A lot of good stuff, but there's this, and it matters, and it needs to be pointed out. You must resist.
Yeah. When it comes to money, we have to remember, so TikTok, NatCon, we have whole legal categories where people under penalty of perjury have to disclose if they were given money for certain things. If you're brokering a sale of a company, if you're part of a nonprofit, you have to be very upfront. I received money from X as an interested party, and I have to disclose it. Judges have to recuse themselves from cases. So maybe they were a client in the past and they have to say, hey, I can't handle this case because I could be biased. We have a huge legal framework for people saying things and saying, and I need to be forthright with you. I need to be honest. I was paid this amount. So these guys that are saying these things, our hope would be, all right, maybe you truly believe it. If we could get you a lie detector, push you in the corner. Yeah, you really truly believe that. But you also need to come out and say, and hey, I got about a $10,000 trip for free. And hey, I was paid this amount of money to post. And hey, this is the influence I would get. Maybe it affected my thinking. Maybe it didn't. But I'm just going to be forthright with you and say, I got this money. Be aware of that.
Yeah, especially with 501c3s. Yeah. I think that there should be an obligation, whether it's a church or whether it's a 501c3, to say, yeah, we received donation in this format, whether it's that is a donation.
In-kind gifts, I think.
Yeah, that's a donation, a $10,000 trip. You need to mark that down and say, yes, I received $10,000 to go to Israel for a week and a half, and these are my positions. This is what I'm saying, and maybe I'm influenced by it, maybe I'm not, but you need to be aware that this is a factor. And apart from that, I think that there is a problem. So all that being said, Israel is they're not going to just, oh, you know what? Well, we lost fair and square. No. Israel knows that the entire world's population of young people, especially Gen Z, Gen Alpha, some millennials, some Gen X, is souring on Israel. They've had enough. They've had enough of foreign influence in our domestic governments. They've had enough of AIPAC. They've had enough of the ADL, literally labeling Christian identity as a hate group.
Well, the ADL had to remove that glossary of hate because they've gotten so much pushback from a younger generation that says, this is ridiculous. It's okay to be white was a hate slogan.
Right.
Hey, Black Lives Matter, no problem.
Great.
It's okay to be white, bigot.
Yep. So Israel is not going to give up without a fight. It's not going to be a whimper. It's going to be clawing and gnashing and giving it everything they got. Right now, Israel in many ways is like a cornered animal, and they're desperate, and they're going to be doing everything they can. They're going to be spending money. They're going to do everything they can to gain back the favor of the West, to be able to manipulate the masses, to be able to seize the levers of influence that they've had for decades and decades and decades, and have recently finally begun to let up. And they're not gonna just say, oh, okay, well, I guess our reign is over. They're going to try to get it back. And buying TikTok is just one way, and you heard it from Netanyahu himself. They are coming for X. So let's go to our first commercial break, and then we'll be right back in our second segment. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We're also going to deal with the super chats. We've already got a number that are pouring in. So I just want to say real quick before we go to our first commercial break, if you have a question and you want it to be prioritized, we make you this personal guarantee. If it is a super chat, then we'll read it. If we have time after doing the super chats first to do any other questions, then we'll do our best. But we've already got a number of super chats that have come in. And so that's probably all we're going to do today. So if you want your question addressed or your comment addressed and read live on the air, then do it in the form of a super chat. We are incredibly humbled and grateful for your generosity and support. We appreciate that. And then also, lastly, if you're new to the channel, make sure on YouTube that you subscribe and click the bell. If you subscribe but don't click the bell, YouTube says, oh, you subscribe to this channel? That must mean that you never want to see any content from this channel ever again. I don't know why, but that seems to be the algorithm. YouTube takes every subscription as someone saying, let me never see anything from them again. So I have been reliably informed that you must click the bell for it to register for YouTube that you actually want to see content from our channel. And then lastly, make sure to follow us on X. Our X account has been growing substantially. We went from, I believe, I didn't even do X until, a little while after Elon had bought it. But started, posting on X regularly. And I believe we went from like 34,000 to 60,000 now just since June.
Generational run.
Generational run. Some are calling it that. I won't say it. Wes said it. But yeah, so follow us on X. The handle is @RightResponseM, as in ministries, @RightResponseM, as in ministries. And our live stream schedule is every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. Central Time. Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 3 p.m. Central Time. All right, let's go to our first commercial break. We'll be right back to talk about Israel and making an attempt at getting more social media platforms, including X.
The danger of centralized power is often represented by the word king. As Americans, we hate the word king. Civilian ownership of body armor is about helping people to have increased power to resist tyrants and criminals. And so, Armored Republic is about helping you to preserve your God-given rights to the honor of the Lord Jesus Christ, because he is the King of Kings, and he governs kings and he will judge them. This is Armored Republic, and in a republic, there is no king but Christ. We are free craftsmen, and we are honored to be your armorsmith of choice.
Hey friends, Gray Toad Tallow is a family business making skin care the way that it should be, simple and clean. The company began as a personal mission to find healthier, more affordable solutions to common skin problems without the chemicals that are found in most products today. Now, that search led to crafting balms from grass-fed, grass-finished animals that were naturally rich in vitamins and healthy fats, which is exactly what your skin craves. These balms fight dryness, they calm eczema and psoriasis, along with other stubborn skin issues, without containing all the nasty toxins. Gray Toad Tallow offers everyday soaps, balms, and beard balm for men. To experience some of their products, grab a balm sample pack. Each batch is made with care in their home and shipped directly to their customers. For skincare, the way that God designed, natural, clean, and effective, visit graytoadtallow.com. Use code RIGHT15 for 15% off your order today. Again, that's graytoadtallow.com. And if you want 15% off, then add the promo code RIGHT15 today. All right, we're back.
The power of censorship, as we mentioned earlier, is that you can give the illusion of a consensus. We've talked about one of the ways, honestly, that you could destroy the new Christian right, whatever you want to call it, is through banking, through private institutions for finding jobs like Indeed and LinkedIn, social media, that would be Facebook, X, Instagram. If you were able to algorithmically identify and then quarantine those people, you could very much so give the perception of a consensus that wherever someone got their news, wherever someone looked for jobs, that you would kind of shut out a small proportion of people and they'd be very, very unable to make a difference. X changed that. This was 2023 when Elon bought it, and it's still not a complete free speech platform. Right. And there's problems. It hosts adult content. It shouldn't. There's much about X that we would change. But for all practical purposes, it has been a place where most of what could be said, most of what isn't illegal, most of what isn't egregiously perverse, it flies. And it's also not artificially suppressed. And this has been a big problem, honestly. Like if you look at the rise, there's anti-Semitism that's like genuine hatred. But if we just want to use kind of the broad term, like it's okay to be white, that's anti-Semitic. Right. We just want to talk about kind of a sense of like, well, why are these people doing this? And historically they did this. That type of just noticing. Well, a big rise in it has been due to X. Because now stories, history, different lessons we've learned through history, people can access them. And as they go for TikTok.
It's all X. Like that. I mean, when you think like what changed? X, like having one social media platform that was not suppressing speech. Like the receipts have come out.
Yeah.
I mean, Zuckerberg admitted that they were taking directives from the Biden administration and suppressing major news stories, including the Hunter Biden laptop. They suppressed millions of stories. And, you know, he did this speech. He was like, well, you know, percentage wise, you know, that means we were only suppressing, you know, like maybe 0.02%, but that still counts. Like his own admission, he said for millions of posts were being suppressed. We forget how dark of a time it was, 2020 to 2024. And when you think like, well, what happened? What changed? A major impetus. Like it's like, well, it's that Trump was elected or it's because this happened. Like you could actually track pretty much everything just to Elon buying X, including it's like, well, Trump was elected. And so now X is better. No. You could argue Elon bought X, and that's the reason Trump was elected.
Right.
Like,
yeah, you don't have to take my word for it.
That's huge.
You don't have to take my word for it that a monopoly of control of private institutions, like guys, Google is private, but they effectively control the public square.
That's right.
And during COVID, different treatments, different science was suppressed. And you literally felt it. You were like, well, I mean, like the only information I can find on treatment and on the vaccine, there's a study, I think it was somewhere in Europe. Hey, the COVID vaccine is linked to an increased risk of cancer. For years, studies, headlines like that were suppressed. And when they were suppressed across the board, you experienced it. You couldn't find good data. The best data you can find, you're pulling up like a website that like has like flashing lights at the top and it's talking about nanotechnology. Because on the regular social media platforms, all of it, blanket ban. So you've experienced in your lifetime, and if you're watching this channel, you probably agree with us on COVID, you've experienced the difficulty of getting information, of finding like-minded people, of getting the story out, of warning others. And that's kind of, if you think about, all right, if TikTok is controlled and has these interests, we're seeing already, this is a screenshot, very benign comment. Someone said, Democrats and Republicans are both controlled by Israel through AIPAC. Do some research. That is not a hateful comment. That is literally just saying, hey, objectively, 250 representatives, Democrat and Republican, went on a 50 states, one Israel tour. Do some research. They're two sides of the same coin. This is a purported screenshot from TikTok just from a day ago. Hey, comment removed. This violates our community guidelines.
Crazy.
You take the biggest social media platform for young people. You take Facebook and Instagram. If they crack down, there's literally one remaining. And we see this. So a new report came out. These are some of the headlines from it for anyone that's listening. Elon Musk is X. Go-to platform for anti-Semitism, study finds. X posted anti-Semitism public affairs. X is among the most effective tools for spreading anti-Semitism in history, research finds. Study anti-Semitism thriving in plain sight on X. They're giving you the playbook. They lost control. The left overplayed its hand. It was with wokeness. It was with BLM. It was with COVID. They overplayed, and there was some pushback. Think about A New Hope. The empire strikes back.
Right.
And so now the play is, all right, control through, again, not Israel as a government, but private individuals with these allegiances, with these goals. Control of TikTok, privately through here. We've got this. Zuckerberg, you got to connect. Like, he's going to have this interest. All the other, we got to be honest, Parler, like nobody, like, we're going to go to Parler and connect. The other ones are too small. The major ones, controlled by people with the same set of interests. Guys, there's like one platform remaining.
There's only one major one. Yeah. There's always going to be alternative platforms, but it's, you lose a massive amount of momentum. It's a fraction of the populace. It might be 1%, maybe it's 5% of, you look at the daily users of X and then compare that with Parler or something else. If they take the major platforms, they win. And X may very well be the last man standing.
Yeah. So that's basically the play that they've given. Be on the lookout for that. 2028 is going to be a huge year. We've talked about this with the fourth turning. There's a lot of momentum that can't be suppressed. Think about energy in a system. The energy has to go somewhere, right? A moving train at 200 miles an hour that has all this energy and it doesn't decide, well, I'm going to take all that energy and I'm just going to stop. Well, if it hits something that it can't go beyond, all that energy dissipates and it goes everywhere. What we have now is cultural momentum. We've been building it since, I think, 2023. There was that old article, The Vibe Shift. Something changed in the water about 2 years ago. And it really, we've had not headwinds. You've used this illustration before. Not headwinds like, man, we're really having to fight uphill for every little bit. No, corporations are coming out and celebrating our values. You have the Department of Homeland Security reposting our guys, our CJ Angle, Fox News, and Aaron McIntyre. We've had tailwinds and we've had support for the last 2 years. So we've made a lot of progress, but this is going to be kind of that final backstop. I think, honestly, before you win, you've used the idea, NatCon's the final boss. There's going to be one final play. Can we corral this young men, older men, some of them millennial, these people that they want America back, they want America first, they're done with immigration, they want to be able to work a real job, own a real home. This is honestly probably the last shot you have to corral them. They're a couple million strong at this point. It's not nothing. And they're everywhere. And they're starting to accrue power. You've got one shot. Kick them out. Isolate. Literally it was called a quarantine report or National Contagion Institute. It's a contagion. It's moving around. We need algorithms. We need AI to quarantine these people, to get them off. This is what's going to be the play for the next 2 years.
Yes.
And you have to develop, sure, X is great for finding people, but those people then need to be in-person networks. You can lose someone on X. Forget about them. You have their phone number, their signal. That's actually a lot harder.
Very well said. We've got a number of super chats. I feel like we should go ahead and try to get to them.
Let's hit a couple and then do our break and then do some more.
Yeah, we'll do that. All right, Nathan, let's see some of the super chats. Here's one. We have $50 from Not Boring Dad. Thank you, Not Boring Dad. We appreciate your generosity. That means a lot. He said, 16 years ago today, an absolutely terrified but head over heels in love young man asked a beautiful Christian woman to marry him. She said yes and has blessed me with many children and as a helpmate. Please tell her Nady loves baby. Nady loves baby.
I'm glad you got to read that one.
Yep. The last part was a little cringe, but I'm sure it means a lot to that one special someone.
And hey, 16 years,
a
happy
husband
anniversary.
Doing a $50 super chat so that his wife would be honored on their anniversary, 16th year anniversary, publicly online. You can't hate it. It's pretty sweet gesture. God bless you, Not Boring Dad. I hope you have a wonderful anniversary. God bless your wife, and may the Lord grant the two of you many more years to come.
All right. This dude rocks, sent $20. Thanks so much. He asked, this is a good question. Why is it common for American churches to criticize alcohol use but ignore gluttony, though Scripture warns about both equally? Proverbs 23:21 puts drunkenness and obesity side by side, yet only the first is usually denounced. I will definitely say there's different time periods that have different prevailing sins. In the early 1900s with the temperance movement, we have to be honest. There's a lot of men that would work and they would take all of their money and they would drink themselves into a stupor. They would not provide, they would not lead in the home, and they would not go to church. And at some level, I'm not justifying the temperance movement, but at some level, it was saying, hey, we have men that are drunks. They are not caring for their family. Right. They are addicted to alcohol. And I would bet during that time, the early 1900s, especially into the Great Depression, you did not have a lot of people that were obese. So at that time, I think the emphasis was correct. That was not the time like, all right, we're doing a 16-part series on gluttony. Right. But it would be appropriate for alcohol. Now, what's funny is alcohol sales are actually going down a ton.
They are. I saw that. Unusual Whales just posted it's like at an
It's like a record low.
Record low, yep.
So we're at a time, I mean, practically in my Christian life, I've known a couple people, they're like, hey, I can't drink. I just, whatever happens, I get one beer in me, I can't do it. So they've said, hey, for my personal conscience, I won't even touch one. But it's not been that many. But of Christians that, to be honest, just by the appearance, struggle with the sin of gluttony, there have been many, many more that I've known in my lifetime. And so
in terms of the question, I agree. But in terms of the question, why? I mean, the simple answer is it's not preached against because the preacher gets to determine the preaching, and right. Preachers are fat.
Yep.
I don't think we have a lot of drunk preachers, so they're comfortable preaching against a sin that they themselves don't struggle with. But we do have a lot of fat preachers. I wish we could take, Pete Hegseth and put him, in like some pastor's conference and give the same speech about, BMI and some of these things.
Subscribe to the Westminster Standards and meet Army height and weight standards.
Yep.
No, it is a serious sin. Like when a man gets to a certain level of obesity, and I'm not talking like 10, 20 pounds overweight, but like morbidly, he gets to the point where it's difficult to father children. He will not live as long. As far as being a protector of the home, there comes a point where you're inept. You can't go up the stairs without getting winded. You couldn't chase. You couldn't fight. You couldn't, heaven forbid, your kid was snatched. You couldn't move fast enough to do anything about them. To over and over again for years on end to the point where you are morbidly obese is a serious sin against nature, and it should be talked about.
Yeah, and it's also a visible sin. So there are private sins, and in terms of your standing before God, it's quite serious. But it's one thing to sin. It's another to be actively sinning. And, when you're publicly in the presence of others in such a way that could cause others to stumble. Think of, Romans 14, anything that does not proceed from faith is sin, or 1 Corinthians talking about, the brother with a weaker conscience and the one with faith who's more mature. We have these biblical texts that what I'm getting at is that whether it's meat sacrificed to idols or whether it's alcohol consumption, we have these biblical texts that talk about how something may be, in the objective sense, morally permissible, meaning that it is okay for you to do with a clean conscience, to do in faith, such as drinking alcohol. But in these same passages, we have context, and context matters, where it says it is objectively permissible for a Christian to, in moderation, drink alcohol. But there are some contexts where you shouldn't. For instance, those contexts where you cause a weaker brother to stumble. Well, when it comes to gluttony, the visible, it would be like having, alcohol, like taking a shower every morning in beer and having a rank stench, strong smell of alcohol on your person, your breath, your clothing every single day. So it's like, well, I'm not drinking in front of people, right? I'm not eating a full, large size pizza by myself, in front of a crowd of people. Yeah, but the visible signs of your gluttony, you're wearing them on your body, in your waistline, every second of the day. So it would be like, well, I'm not drinking a fifth in front of people. Yeah, but you smell like you did. And so in the same way that it would be improper, right? It is morally permissible to, in moderation, drink alcohol as a Christian. But it would be improper to douse yourself with a fifth of gin every morning on your way into work. And
go to Alcoholics Anonymous to just observe.
Right. So in the same way, that's how gluttony is, because it's It's this apparent, constant, continual, visible sign. It's a constant, publicly visible sign of sin. So it's very serious. And I can only guess that the reason more pastors don't preach against it is because more pastors are guilty of it. All right, next comment.
Let's hit our second commercial
Yeah,
break,
let's
and
do
then
that.
we'll finish out the super chats.
Perfect. When it comes to your financial future, are you planning forward or backwards from your desired results? What type of financial culture do you want to create for your family and for your children's children? We are not called to be wise as doves. Therefore, simpleton planning simply won't cut it. Joe Garrissey helps families develop and implement a long-term culture of excellent financial management. He starts with your goals, your tithing plan, your retirement, and the legacy that you want to build for your generations. And then he works backwards to build a real, actionable plan to get your family on track. Now, many of my personal friends have benefited from the financial wisdom of Joe Garrissey that he shared for their specific situations. Do you want to work with someone who strives for alpha with your investing, hates taxes, and brokers insurance? Start planning smart. Call Joe Garrissey at 615-767-2555. Again, that's 615-767-2555. Or you can find him by going to backwardsplanningfinancial.nm.com. Again, that's backwardsplanningfinancial.in as in Nancy, M as in ministries.com. The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, declares the Lord of hosts. Yet your retirement dollars keep shrinking daily as Washington prints money out of thin air. Genesis Gold Group aligns financial guidance with godly principles when others serve only profit. Their faith-centered approach to Gold IRAs stands apart in an industry that has forgotten what true stewardship actually means. Why gamble your family's future on Wall Street's paper promises? Your 401k and IRA deserve better protection. Genesis Gold Group transforms your vulnerable retirement accounts into physical gold, something real, something tangible, something that God created with inherent value. Their faith-driven experts walk you through every step, helping you shield your life's work from the financial storms up ahead. No high-pressure tactics, no hidden fees, just guidance rooted in timeless principles of sound stewardship. So the decision is simple. Watch your retirement evaporate through inflation or secure it in God's precious metal. Take action now. Go and visit rightresponseBibleGold.com. You can visit today for your free book, The Bible and Gold, and join the thousands of believers who sleep soundly knowing their future is anchored in something unshakable. Again, that's rightresponseBibleGold.com, safeguarding your legacy with God's timeless treasure. All right, we're back. Next super chat is from Nick Bonner. He's one of our regular donors and asking good questions, making good comments. We appreciate you, Nick. Thank you. He gave us $10 and said, "I pray that Xi Jinping, yeah, sorry, the president of China, right?
Yeah.
Okay, president of China does not allow the usual suspects to censor our glorious anti-Semitism app."
I don't know if he cares whatsoever.
I don't think he cares. Yeah, and that's why, like, I tweeted out, the other day, and it got like 320,000 likes.
Just a little before lunch banger.
Just a little before lunch banger. 300. I think it's like 315,000 likes. But I said, I did, the little image of the Rockefeller type painting with the guy standing up in a chapel. Everyone's looking at him, and he's saying something courageous. And it wasn't that courageous, but I said, I would rather China own TikTok than Israel.
Yeah.
And the reason why is not because I don't think that China poses any threat or any problem whatsoever. I'm not a big fan of the Chinese government by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think that they should be allies. But I think for me, I think that most Americans are kind of more aware of that. I think that most Americans are pretty conscious of the fact that China is not an ally, that China doesn't have our best interest at heart. Whereas with Israel, one of my concerns is that I actually think that they're far more subversive. I really do. I think that a lot more people in America, especially Christians, have the wool pulled over their eyes. And so I'm more concerned, especially as a Christian and a Christian minister, I'm far more concerned about American Christians who are deceived by Israel than American Christians who none of them really are fond of the Chinese government to begin with.
Yeah. We also had to practically say, too, it's kind of easy to tell if you have someone that's obviously Chinese or Chinese American and they're advocating, we should sell this land off to the Chinese Communist Party. Well, that I kind of see what's going on here.
Right.
But if I was to go to Europe and learn German and then, I think that we should bring in these people or that, it wouldn't be as easy to decipher. And so with China, their probably next move is Taiwan. They want to bring Taiwan and fold it underneath. That's probably what they're going to do. I don't think we're looking at a full-scale attack or nuclear war. So we kind of know their plan. It's going to be very obvious if they declare war on Taiwan, if they invade it. But on the other end, you won't actually even notice if that friend that you used to hear from, that page that you liked the posts from, you're probably going to actually forget about them if they quietly get banned.
Right.
That is much more nefarious. That one's much easier to kind of pull the wool over the eyes than, we happen to capture the semiconductor capital of the world for manufacturing. Well, we all know what the play is there, and we can respond accordingly. But that happens, well, who do I appeal to? Who do I go to? Who made this decision? It's cloaked in secrecy.
Yep. Well said. Hal gave us $10 super chat. He doesn't have a comment or a question attached. He just gave us $10, being generous. Hal, we really appreciate that. Thank you. And then we've got one more super chat. It's $100 from Dylan Harrington. $100 from Dylan Harrington. Dylan, thank you. That's very generous. We appreciate it very much. Dylan says, how long before TPUSA comes out with a pro-Israel statement? What do you think, Wes?
Charlie Kirk, he loved him some Israel.
He loved him some Israel.
And he was probably, honestly, the forefront. You think of different apologists, one of the youngest and one of the most vocal supporters of Israel. Like Dennis Prager is 1,500 years old at this point.
Right, and paralyzed. Yeah.
And at this point, paralyzed. So he was the youngest, which was really engaging. And then TPUSA, he was the CEO. He was the leader. And so they reflected that vision. How long before they come out with the pro-Israel statement? We'll see. It depends how, because Erica Kirk, she's aiming to kind of continue his legacy, kind of continue the mission that he started. We'll see how much of it came across in private. So she thinks about the things that Charlie stood for. Is that going to stand up there? So she's going to say he wanted conservatives and he wanted people to have families and he really wanted Israel to do X and Y and Z. Maybe that comes across, and maybe you'll see a podcast episode with so and so talking about the dangers of anti-Semitism. Or also practically, she could carry on the vision and just by virtue of the people that join it, they kind of recognize, this is not the issue to die on.
It's not a winning issue.
Like Charlie studied for years because he was literally saying towards the end, every single time he would set up on campus, hey, why do you support Israel doing this? Do you know what the Talmud says about this? What about Israel being involved in these, or Jews being involved in these social movements? He was literally like a full-time apologist for Israel.
He was.
Conservatism on the side. And, he loved him some Israel.
He did.
Whether that will be continued depends on the people who take leadership, different TPUSA chapters, the people themselves. Like if you start a TPUSA chapter and you break out the Israel flag and 50% of the people that just joined and they're excited about it walk out, that sends kind of a message. And so that very much so remains to be seen. The inertia is certainly pro-Israel. That's what TPUSA has been. That's what Charlie was, for better or for worse. Will that continue? We'll see.
Yeah. So I think it's yet to be determined. We have to see, Erica has been appointed CEO of TPUSA, but, who actually comes alongside her. I'm hoping that, the majority of her time is spent as a mother with her two children who now have a deceased father. And so I don't think that, she'll be CEO and be making some decisions, but day in and day out, I think it's probably going to be new leadership that fills the void. And so it depends on who those individuals are and what their convictions are. But there's one other factor that I think we'd be, in the spirit of this overall episode, we would be remiss if we didn't include. It also depends on whether or not there's a handsome check. I do think that it's entirely, we know that Charlie, at least from what we've heard, allegedly he turned down $150 million from Israel.
Dylan followed up and said, I was under the impression that his sentiment towards Israel changed shortly before.
Yeah, so I don't think so.
say.
I don't think so. So I've heard a lot of people saying that. I think that Charlie, he did one of these and put his finger in the wind and realized I cannot be an insufferable, unapologetic shill for Israel and keep, a fraction of the amount of influence that he had built up over the last 10 years. I think he just realized this is a losing issue. And if I want to be effective on the right in conservative politics, I've got to at least be willing to humor the other side. It seemed, at least appear to be a little bit more objective, or at least individually as the man, the person, Charlie Kirk, I can be pro-Israel, but I at least need to score some points with this massive growing population of people who really do not like Israel. Score some points by at least platforming some people who represent the other side of the aisle, and so that's what you saw in the latest TP USA conference before Charlie's assassination. You saw Dave Smith, you saw Tucker Carlson, and a lot of people put a lot of pressure on Charlie, and good on him. Like he even had, I think, with Meg Kelly or something. There's clips from a podcast where he, was talking about how much pressure he was under to drop Tucker Carlson as one of the speakers at TPUSA, and he didn't. And he even, not only did he have Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson and give Tucker Carlson a main session, but he hosted a conversation about what's happening, in Gaza and what's going on with Israel and Iran with Dave Smith, who's very outspoken against it. And so he actually had not just those individuals, but that designated topic and discussion represented at TPUSA. So in that sense, I think Charlie was pivoting his tactics, is the way I see it. I don't think he was shifting his position. I really don't. I think Charlie loved him some Israel to the day that he died. He loved Jesus, and he loved Israel, and I'm like, well, I would have preferred for you to pick a lane, but like many, I mean, let's just think that, the last 50, 60, 80 years, a lot of people have died just assuming that Israel is God's chosen people, and, and I think, they died in ignorance. So I don't think that Charlie was nefarious. I'm not saying that he was malicious, but I think that he had the mainstream view, that was common among conservatives in America at the time of his ascendancy.
Well, think about money too. I mean, Dennis Prager was a huge influence in his life, who
Ben
kind
Shapiro.
of gave him platforms. And understandably, there was more at play than just simply Israel. He was bright, he was articulate, he was well studied. But practically, the only way you were going to make it in conservative media
10
up
years
till,
ago.
honestly, even still to a degree today, most certainly 10 years ago, well, everyone there would have been pro-Israel. So it was also the milieu he came up in. It was the money.
Yeah,
from those people.
Here's the deal. Charlie
just be
Kirk
honest.
let's just be honest. Like, it's like everybody knows he's a household name.
Right.
He's a household name because he was pro-Israel.
Yeah.
If he was outspokenly against Israel, as talented as he's, so I don't want to take away anything from him. So I'm not saying he was just pro-Israel. There's plenty of pro-Israel people who are, they don't have any talent to speak of, and so you don't know their name. Charlie, was pro-Israel, and he was talented, he was gifted, he was sharp, he was likable, he was charismatic, all these different things. He was, he had that Protestant work ethic. He was incredibly disciplined, vigilant, and all these different things. And so he was a rising star on his own merit, with his own giftings, his own discipline, his own work. But his pro-Israel position may not have exactly, put him on the map. But if he was against Israel, it would have been an inhibitor.
Well, Ben Shapiro would never nuke an intern just for asking questions, right? He would respond and give him the reasons.
Especially someone who only has 1,000 Twitter followers at the time. Yeah, he
webcam from his dorm room,
or a secretly recorded cell phone from a random girl when you don't even know you're being recorded, and then that's put online and then retweeted by Ben Shapiro. So yeah, Charlie, you know of Charlie because he was gifted, he was godly, a lot of great things. Hats off to Charlie. You also know of Charlie because he towed the line on Israel, and if he had not, I think he still would have been gifted and gone far. But in the climate in conservative politics in America, as it's been until very, very recently, last couple years, it would not have allowed for Charlie to have been outspoken against Israel and still have the degree of notoriety that he was able to achieve. So no, I don't think that Charlie was changing his position. I do think, though, that as the cultural winds have shifted and people, many young people, because that's the thing, Charlie wasn't just a conservative. His whole thing was reaching the youth, right? So he literally had his whole platform is not just conservative politics, but particularly, college students and high school students, the youth. And the youth is the exact demographic that has, before our eyes, very quickly and significantly soured on Israel. And so I think Charlie, knowing that that the youth is his target audience and that the youth are souring on Israel, I think he made some concessions in his tactics, right? Like a willingness to have Dave Smith, Tucker Carlson, have some of those conversations. I don't think that he actually changed in terms of his position. That's my best guess.
And that's the power of money. Glenn Beck, Dennis Prager, Ben Shapiro. When you have money and influence, you get to be a kingmaker.
Yes.
So you get to pick and choose. Hey, I like this guy. He's using our rhetoric. I like this guy. He's towing the line, or at least he's willing to. Oh, this guy isn't. I'm going to demote him. That's the power, whether it be money, enough to buy TikTok and own a platform, set your own moderation levels on it, whether it's the ability to take up and coming young stars and make them into household names. That's the power of money. Money makes you a kingmaker.
Right.
Media, individuals. So the kingmakers at the time, that's what they saw in Charlie.
Real quick, before we end the stream, do us a favor and hit the like button. If you're watching this on X, like the post and share the post. If you comment, that helps even more, but at least retweet it. On X, the posts disappear, video disappears. It's good while you're broadcasting live. As soon as it's done, though, the stream is done, it pretty much goes into the void, never to be seen again. And one of the only ways that you can give it legs and some staying power is if individuals watching you while you're live choose to like the post and, most importantly, retweet it. So help us out on X. The handle again is @RightResponseM, M as in ministries, @RightResponseM. Do us a favor, like the post and retweet it, share it. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already and click the bell. And then also share the video on YouTube and give it a thumbs up. Like the video. It helps us tremendously. Any final words, Wes?
There's a good question. Are we justified by works? I don't want to open the huge. We talked about Protestants and Catholics, but it's really the distinction. It's important and it's fascinating. So are we justified by works? To be justified is, and this is what Luther captured in the Protestant Reformation. He actually went back to the Greek. And in the Greek, the word for justification, dikaiosune, righteousness.
Forensic.
It's declarative, forensic. It's
Judicial.
legal.
Yeah.
So justified in that sense, in the Greek, the language that it was written in is the idea of, am I declared righteous based on what I do?
Declaring me righteous in a court.
Exactly. Now, Jerome, with the Latin
not
Vulgate,
being righteous or becoming righteous, but sanctification is likened to a process of being made righteous. Justification is likened to a declaration or pronouncement in a moment. So sanctification, a process, being made righteous. Justification, a moment, being declared righteous.
Yes. But Jerome, when he translates the Latin Vulgate, the word in Latin that is used is more the idea of to make just. So this was what was burdening Luther's conscience. So he said, well, God justifies the righteous, but I have to be made just. And I'm a sinner here and I'm a sinner there. Mm-hmm. And that's the crucial distinction, is that justification, it's a one-time thing. And in the original language, the language Paul is using, it is a legal declaration. So our works don't factor into it. We are declared righteous because Jesus died for us. God looks on Christ as if he was us. Now sanctification comes in because James says justification without works is dead.
Right.
What does he mean? That we're justified by our works? No, justification lacking the attending sanctification.
Right.
There is a sense in which justification also makes us righteous.
Right.
We're made by being declared righteous, made righteous in sanctification. So we're not declared right with God because of works. But in the final analysis, our sanctification will be evidence of, oh yeah, they were legally declared justified, righteous before God.
Right. Luther put it like this. He said, we're saved and justified. When he said saved, he's primarily talking about justification. There's a sense in which we have been saved, we're being saved. Ephesians says we are being saved, and also we will be saved. I think of Romans chapter 7, where Paul the apostle, who I believe this is post-conversion, he's already a Christian, and yet he still writes, who will, right? Who will, future tense, save me from this body of death. So he's not saying who will save my soul. His soul has already been saved, justification. He's not saying who is saving me, present tense, the renewing of his mind, sanctification, but who will save this body, speaking of a future future tense element of salvation, namely glorification, right? The salvation of the body. So you could look at it like this: justification, sanctification, glorification. Justification, past, the soul having been declared righteous, the soul being saved. Sanctification, present and ongoing. That is the mind being renewed, being sanctified. You're being saved. And then glorification, the body being fully restored and redeemed and resurrected on the final day, the body, and that future tense, you will be saved. So we have been saved, we're being saved, we will be saved. Justification, sanctification, glorification. And so back to the Luther quote, he said that we're saved by faith alone. And when he says saved here, he's not speaking so much about sanctification or glorification, but namely justification. The salvation that for the Christian is already a past tense. It's a moment of being declared righteous. So he's saying we're justified, saved in the sense of justification. We are justified by faith alone, but true saving faith is never alone. So he says we're saved by faith alone, but true saving faith is never alone. And so what he's saying is it is the faith alone that saves. But if it be a saving faith, a real faith, a living faith, then it will always be manifest with good works. Good works, I always think of Samwise Gamgee, right? When Frodo is hopping into the little boat and he's about to paddle down the river and he's leaving the rest of the company. This is Fellowship of the Ring, leaving the rest of the company behind because he realizes that the task that's been appointed to him to take the ring to Mordor so that it could be unmade. He realizes that this is a great risk and that he poses a threat to everyone around him. And so he's not wanting to endanger the rest of his company, the Fellowship of the Ring. And so he's going to set off alone. And so he climbs into the boat and he's already, pushed off from the shore and he's in the middle of the river starting to paddle. And Samwise, realizes that he's gone and he catches up to him. He's standing on the shore. He said, "Mr. Frodo, no, don't leave. And Frodo says, "I'm sorry, Sam. I have to do this alone. I have to go and destroy the ring." And Sam responds by saying, "Of course you do. And I'm coming with you."
Yeah.
And I think of that with faith and works, right? So it's like faith is on the ship. Faith is like Frodo and works are like Sam. So Frodo is like, but I'm saved by faith alone. And then good works, Sam's like, "Of course you are. And I'm coming with you." And that's kind of the picture of the Christian life. It's like good works for the Christian. It's like faith is like, "No, but I'm saved by faith alone." And good works are like, "Of course you are, but we're coming with you." And so it is with every genuine Christian born again by the Spirit of God, by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. That person cannot help but have Samwise Gamgee, good works, wading into the water and forcing himself onto the ship and coming with you. Because if you truly have faith, you will have good works. We're saved by faith alone, but saving faith is never alone.
We have a Catholic in the chat. He said, Joel is quoting Catholic Tolkien to shore up Luther. How disrespectful. And to clarify,
we love Tolkien, and he was Catholic, and we appreciate him very much. We also love G.K. Chesterton.
Yep.
Appreciate him very much.
And to clarify, when I said about Jerome translating, sometimes in different languages, like there's German words that don't have an English equivalent. So I'm just practically saying that one of the outworkings, the Greek into the Vulgate, into the Latin, was it had more of an idea of to make. Whereas I think in the Greek, and I think the way you espouse it is a much more helpful term instead of feeling as though, well, I have to make
Luther
righteous.
called it forensic righteousness.
Yes. God has legally declared me as if I've never sinned.
Imputed, not infused
Right.
through a process or through sacraments, but imputed, accredited to the account. It's like a bank transfer. All the righteousness of Christ transferred, imputed, not infused, in a moment. Through faith. Forensic righteousness, judicial righteousness, declarative righteousness.
Right. And I can understand what Catholics can try to guard against. Well, if you just make it about faith, then it sounds like if someone says magic words or believes some intellectual assent, that they can be saved and go on and live
we call
terribly.
That a paperwork Christian.
Paperwork
right?
Americans.
There's paperwork Americans
Christians.
like Ilhan Omar, and then there's paperwork Christians. It's like, well, where's the paperwork? The Billy Graham crusade where they literally signed a piece of paper when they walked down the aisle. Like there's a paper.
Like 99% of them stuck with it, right?
There is such a thing as a paperwork American. There's also such a thing as a paperwork Christian, and Luther was not ever advocating for one of those. But for the Catholics in the chat, if they're saying, yeah, but there's a lot of Protestants today who are, we would say, so true, King. You're absolutely right. And that is a major problem. But we're not. That's not who we are. We want to see Christians do good works. And I think of the book of Hebrews. It says that we should earnestly pursue holiness, for without which no one will see the Lord. Even R.C. Sproul, who was a Protestant, died a Protestant, faithful Protestant, and was outspoken against Roman Catholicism pretty much every day that ended in Y. Even he said that holiness that Hebrews speaks of, for without holiness no one will see the Lord. He said, I'd bet my hat that the holiness being spoken of here is a progressive righteousness belonging to sanctification, and not the accredited, imputed righteousness, holiness that comes through faith and justification from Christ. So, and essentially, what Sproul was saying is, without good works, active, ongoing, progressive sanctification, good works, you will not see the Lord. Why? Because we're saved by works? No, because the total absence of good works is proof positive that there's no justification. And he also said, one more example from Sproul, he spoke of when Jesus says, but I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees. And a lot of Protestants will interpret that and say, oh, well, Jesus is speaking of positional, not progressive righteousness, right, with good works and sanctification, but positional righteousness, declarative righteousness belonging to justification, which is through faith alone. A lot of Protestants will preach that text, and they'll say, when Jesus says, I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees, you will not see the kingdom of heaven. A lot of Protestants will say, oh, well, Jesus is talking about positional righteousness, justification, and for every Christian, every genuinely born-again Christian, your righteousness does exceed that of the Pharisees because you have the perfect righteousness of Christ, which has been accredited to you through faith. Yeah, that is true. But Sproul, God bless him, he was one of the Protestant pastors who said, that's true, that concept, that principle is true, and we can preach it elsewhere from other texts of Scripture, but I don't believe that that's what Jesus had in mind in that particular text. He says, no, I think the point that Jesus is making is that the Pharisees, even in terms of their progressive righteousness, their actions, their works, they're not that righteous. The favorite label that Jesus gave to these Jewish, rabbis is not legalist, right? Protestants always, the problem with the Pharisees were they were legalists. They cared too much about good works. That's not what Jesus says. He literally says, do as they do. Do as they say, but do not do as they do. What's the number one word Jesus uses to describe the Pharisees, Sadducees, the lawyers, the scribes? It's not legalist. The word he uses is hypocrite. In other words, according to Jesus, exceeding the righteousness of the Pharisees was not just a matter of having the perfect righteousness of Christ and justification. It was actually being a better person and doing better works than the Pharisees, which was not actually a high bar because the Pharisees were full of it. The Pharisees weren't actually righteous. They were hypocrites. They talked a big game, but they could talk the talk, but they didn't walk the walk. And I think Sproul is right that when Jesus says your righteousness needs to exceed even the righteousness of the Pharisees, I don't believe, as Sproul did not believe, that Christ is speaking of the positional righteousness belonging to justification in that instance. But he's saying, no, it should be normative for the Christian life that his progressive, ongoing righteous works exceed that of the Pharisees, not because that's what saves him, but as a proof, as a demonstration and evidence of the faith that does save. And the faith that truly saves will manifest itself in good works, and those good works will actually be superior good works to the Pharisees, because the Pharisees, they taught good works, but they did not do them. They were hypocrites. So we have ample examples, whether it's the book of James, ample examples to stress the vital importance of good works without making good works necessary for justification. So great question. I'm glad we had time to get to it. Again, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and click the bell on X. Go ahead and follow us. The handle is @RightResponseM, M as in Ministries. We broadcast on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. Central Time. And if you've been blessed by this ministry, we're trying to be explicitly, unapologetically Christian ministry that speaks to culture, speaks to politics, and is not Zionist. We're not taking the money. We're not taking the trip. We're not doing these kinds of things. And so, sadly, there's not a whole lot. Like, honestly, there are guys on the right who are anti-Zionist. There's more and more guys cropping up every single day. But a lot of
Muslims are anti-Zionist.
That's right. But a lot of them are not explicitly Christian, right? Jake Shields, he's been kind to me. We've had a couple conversations on the phone. We might collaborate, but he's not a Christian by his own admission. one of the reasons I want to do something with him is he's asking me questions about the Lord. And I want to take that opportunity to tell him about Christ and to share with him the gospel, whether I do it publicly on his show or whether I do it privately on the phone. But I want to share Christ with him. But he's an example. He's doing a lot of things that I think are helpful and good, but he is not a Christian. So there are a lot of non-Zionists. There weren't 10 years ago. There are today a lot of non-Zionists, but they're not necessarily unapologetically, explicitly Christian. And there are a lot of Christians, but a lot of the Protestant Christians are kind of Zionist. And so we feel like, if it was a Venn diagram, this overlap, this sweet spot, it's, in this case, it's a sliver, right? Yeah. On this hand, you have Christians. On this hand, you have guys who are not Zionist. And the overlap is very narrow, and I don't know a lot of guys in this space. So the last thing I'm saying, I'm going to say it humbly. I'm not trying to guilt anyone's conscience. Feel free to tune it out if you don't feel called to do so. But we do need your help. We are under immense attack all the time. I personally, my family, we are under immense attack all the time because a lot of Christians will just say, well, Joel he's an anti-Semite. He's a sexist. He's a racist. He's this, he's that. And so we don't, there's a lot of Christians who are trying to destroy this ministry. And then the guys who agree with us, with our cultural, our political positions, they've actually been more kind to us in many ways than many of the Christians have, but they're not Christian. And we feel like there needs to be someone in this new ascendant right, whatever you want to call it, the new right in this space, who is anti-Zionist and is able to speak with courage to these things, but also explicitly, unapologetically Christian. We're not saying we're the only ones, like Elijah, he has this pity party. I'm the only one left. We're not the only ones, but I do think it's fair to say that they're few and far between. And so if you would prayerfully consider supporting our ministry financially, that's the last thing that I'll say, we would greatly appreciate it. You can do so by simply going to rightresponseministries.com/donate. Again, that's rightresponseministries.com/donate. And those charitable gifts are all tax deductible, and we greatly appreciate your generosity. So that's it for today. Lord willing, we will see you on Friday at 3 p.m. Central Time. Thanks for tuning in.